But I don't know if you guys noticed, but I couldn't download the peer review. Like you have to fill it out and turn it in and then click on the link again.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm writing everything down. That way I just kind of have a general idea of what to put in the peer review stuff.
Okay.
I copy and pasted it to a Word document. So
that works too.
You want to do that too.
Talking about the Google thing?
Oh, well, are we supposed to turn them in? I'm just submitting them as we go.
Oh, you could do that.
Yeah, you could do that.
That's what I'm doing too.
I just know if I was trying to do it as we go, I wouldn't pay attention as much as I should have.
Yep, exactly. That'd be me.
Okay, cool. Okay, just wanted to throw that out there. And then, so I think, Catherine, you're next, right? But before you go, I could be wrong, but I thought I read somewhere that she wanted to see you. So you might have to turn on your video.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Am I right?
Yeah, I think that's a thing.
Just for your speech. Just for yours.
Okay, well, let me just do my hair real quick. Okay.
Mine is windblown, so you're probably better than mine.
It can't be any worse.
Okay.
Okay, so whenever you're ready.
Okay, good.
You dim the lights.
Okay. I can't believe I'm the second one. Okay, so I actually did.
Okay, wait, I just want to remind everyone we'll mute and then you can go.
Okay. Oh, so I can go now. Okay. So I did Boolean, the topic Boolean. I usually choose this topic mostly for many reasons because I feel like it's a very topic that's going on around the world right now, and just thinking about children and how innocent lives are getting lost because of it. So I want to start off with explaining what Boolean is first. So where's that? Okay. So Bullying is an unwanted and aggressive behavior among school-aged children mostly that involves a real perceived power imbalance. The behavior can be repeated in so many cases. Where's my outline? So my main topic is to be able to stand up for bullying, and my specific purpose for this is to encourage my peers to join pretty much an event that, or pretty much in other words, to also help out with supporting children that are getting bullied and to stand up for that movement and stuff. I have found information that says that 38 thousands of suicide deaths were reported in the U.S. in 2010. This latest rise places suicide as the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. So it's getting pretty high up there, and for it to be 10th place, that's kind of really sad. Third leading cause of death is between around the ages of 10 to 24 years old. And some of them have been caused by car crashes or homicides. Is that how you say? Okay. Sorry. And so I don't know if I did this right, but I did bullet points, so bear with me. Some of the many leading causes of suicide are due to mental illnesses and serious accidents, such as physical and verbal or sexual abuse, a series of loss of loved ones as well. It happens also when people struggle financially and feel like death is the last resource for them. So I'll be speaking to you guys about the cyberbullying as well as bullying and how those two work together. I'm going to name one of the 3 points. First point I would like to talk about is the suicide rate has been increasing at a steady pace. And the second one is bullying and cyberbullying are becoming too common. Third bullet point I would like to focus is that there are many movements and organizations that you can join to take a stand against bullying as the result for this threat. When it comes to the first point, there's many people that have survived suicide attempts, then die, but often some of them have had serious injuries that have not had a cure on it too. There has been every 13.7 minutes someone in the United States dies by suicide. Like I said before, there's 36,000 people killed themselves in 2010 and 36,000 killed themselves in 2009, an average of 101 each day. Nearly 1 million people make suicide attempt every year. Suicide affects everyone, but some groups are at higher risk than others. Men are about 4 times more likely than women to die from suicide. However, women are more likely to have a suicidal thought than men. The prevalence of suicidal thoughts, suicide planning, and suicide attempts is significantly higher among young adults, ages 18 to 29 years old, than it is among adults aged less than or equal to 30 years old. Mostly some of the items that people have used during bullying, it's firearms as their coming thing, and it's mostly being used as they're mostly being used weapon by males. That means that for every suicide that you hear, there are probably at least 25 suicide attempts made. The signs for bullying are not always obvious. Some of the people, especially teenagers, like to hide their feelings, and sometimes when they just mention like they want to kill themselves, it's probably a sign that they're trying to seek help just by saying that as a joke when they think it's a joke. Says here, the director of National Center of Injury Prevention and Control states, it's harsh reminder that suicide and suicide attempts are affecting too many youth and young adults. For 10 to 14 years old females, the rate of suicide has increased by 76%, and that is being told by Center of Disease Control and Prevention. For 15 and 19 years old females, the rate of attempted and successful suicides increased by 32%. There's some stories here I would like to share with you guys about those suicides and what causes those events. It says here that in March, Eden Woomer, a 14-year-old, an 8th grader, hung herself after 2 years of being bullied online and in school. These are actually stories I found through news. Eden's sister said that Eden changed her appearance first several times in an effort to fit in with her friends. So that was a sign right there to start noticing. In 2010, Ashlyn Connor was in a small town, all-American girl, honor rolls, and loved stray cats. Dream of becoming a vet. Being bullied for years, Ashlyn took her own short life by hanging herself from a knitted scarf of clothing robe in her bedroom closet. She was only 10 years old. Joel Morales, a 12-year-old, was taunted at school about his small size, his high IQ, and made fun of the death of his father. After not returning home from an after-school club meeting, Joel's mother organized a search party, only to find him later that night hanging from a raffle in their apartment. Last November, her mother found her 10-year-old daughter, Samantha, hanging from a belt in her room and held her in her arms as she took her last breath. These stories I've shared, it just makes me think how all of these are young ages that pretty much use the fastest resort of just hanging themselves as the easier way to leave. There is an event that goes on twice a year that supports bullying. It's an event called Stand Up for Bullying, International Stand Up for Bullying. It usually happens in February or November of every year. And the event is usually everyone across the world who have signed a pledge shirt joined together and wearing them. They, of course, are loud and a non-confrontational message of resistance to bullies. They identify themselves as victims as well, of source of helping to support the event. The stand-up, where does it usually take? It usually takes places in 25 different countries as well. And how does it take place? Each participant must pledge themselves and their community members by signing their name in the back of the pledge shirts. So pretty much people just join and support, and there is pretty much lots of victims are part of that as well. And I feel like it's a good way for them to relieve their pain, such as supporting other people to not go through the same struggle they went through. And that's it. Sorry, I choked on my words too much.
No, you did good. Thank you. Okay, I'll start.
That's what I'm supposed to do. I did so many resources and stuff. I'm just
Yeah. Well, I think we all have our different ways of doing it. So I know Ashley did bullet points too. So yeah, if that's what works for you, that's good. I'll start off the questions. Did you, in your research about that last program that you talked about, did they discuss if that particular program was effective? Was it like,
yes.
It was effective?
Yes, it usually is, since they have made it, in the United States, it mostly happens, from what I've read, it mostly happens in California. It mentions that it's usually a semi-annual one, like it's very important for the community and stuff. So they have seen lots of success, and I have searched like when is the next one for 2019 and how was the other events went. They were like, yeah, it's so good and everything. So I think it does work out, and it's such a good
No, thanks. I'm in California. I've never heard of it before. So it's like, oh, wow.
Sorry,
Yeah.
it says California. It probably mentions other states that I probably missed.
Oh, no, that's good. Okay, I'll let somebody else ask.
Okay, I have a question. So you talked a lot about how bullying is a threat and how it affects the person being bullied. You talked about things that can help bring awareness to bullying. Do you think that there needs to be any help outreach to the bully?
Yes, I do think. I think the first resource should definitely be seeking the mental and physical help, of course. I wish I would have mentioned that as well, but definitely I do support that they're supposed to seek the help right away instead of like letting it slide for a while. I've been watching lots of videos with my mom that I feel like people just when someone tells them something negative, they like keep it to their heads, like to the point that they just can't anymore, and they just take advantage. And I feel like there's lots of programs that do help with bullying as well. If that answers your question. Okay, good.
I have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So I know you mentioned a lot of statistics about suicide rates, and you mentioned like how the age group of like 18 to 29, I think, had like the highest rate of suicide. Why do you think it's so much more prevalent for that age group?
Very good question. I feel like that age is when they pretty much, when 18, when teenagers or us just start leaving our family's nest, and we just pretty much go into the world and we experience new things. We have to start paying bills, we make families. There's sometimes as well that I found out there's teenagers that when they're outside the world, they realize who they really are. And there's where they notice like, wow, I'm actually struggling with this. And when they're struggling with that, they are more easily attached by bad influences outside the world. So it's a very common age for people to fall into that, because there's where they pretty much feel like they don't need their family, but they definitely do need friends and support than just themselves. As when it comes to bullying, they're going to easily be attacked faster because they don't have the right resources because of it.
Thank you.
All right. I have two questions, but they basically are they go really well together. It's how do you look for the warning signs of those that are being bullied? And is it easy to overlook the signs because some kids are pretty good at hiding it. So in those situations, how do you notice them? And
Very good question. So I actually grew up in an area where it's mad, pretty much not super ghetto, but bad, very bad influence and stuff. And I noticed lots of bullying happening with like your close friends, that you don't even realize that they start calling you like a nickname or something like that. And then eventually it goes on around the whole school, and everyone just like, okay, like it starts getting old, that nickname, but yet that person's believing like, wow, you're pretty much like a weirdo and no one likes you and stuff. And I feel like that's a sign. It comes from our close friends and how close of a relationship we give to them for them to offend us like that. Also, there's some signs that I've noticed that that's a cute husky. And there's some signs that I've noticed that sometimes there's people that are very opened up when they are in their bad senses. Like, when they're pretty much like sad, like and you hear the right feelings then. And I noticed that through lots of my friends, that when they just can't do life, like they're just having too much pressure, that they speak the true feelings of their heart. And that's how I also read the signs that they are struggling and they need the help. That makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. So do you have like a specific idea for how cyber bullies can be like handled? Because I think in some of my research this week, it's kind of hard to like navigate that, because in real life, if you're bullied by somebody on the playground, like there's consequences because you have somebody right there with you, to help. But cyberbullying kind of creates a whole different level of like complications, So I don't know. Do you have any ideas, or did you find anything related to that?
So cyberbullying. So I found some research that, let me see. I'll find it real quick. I think it was really good at answering my question. Sometimes, so let me see if I understand your question. Are you trying to say like what are some of the signs that for us to like notice when cyberbullying is happening?
Yeah, like how can my gosh, guys, I have serious pregnancy brain right now. I'm sorry. My question was like cyberbullying is different than regular bullying in the sense that the person that's actually doing the action doesn't have like repercussions. You know what I mean? Like I can go online and just find somebody to cyberbully right now. And, like how do you handle the actual like act of cyberbullying? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I feel like one of the ways to be able to handle that is by being able to, well, when it comes to children, speak up, share your feelings right away. I know sometimes we just don't know who's talking to us on Facebook or who stalks us and stuff, and they can just easily start drama with or bullying us out of nowhere without even knowing us. And I feel like one of the ways that the resources I have found out is like that you need to speak up right away before it like starts getting worse. It also takes lots of research of like finding out ways, like my mom has always mentioned that we need to report everything to the police or just seek for the professional help, not only if it's the police can't do much, but also like seek psychology help that they can give you the right resources of what you should do next. But when it comes to cyberbullying, definitely don't procrastinate it or anything. Like be there when it comes to parents and children. Have an eye on your kids, and you want your kids to have Facebook, you should have Facebook and keep an eye on them as well. I think that's what my thing will be that I learned.
I like that. That's good. Thanks.
I actually, my son in high school was like the victim of cyberbullying, and we ended up calling the school, and the school directed us to call the police, and the police told me that we could file charges against her. So I mean, you can file charges against someone for cyberbullying. We didn't, but yeah. Okay. Who else hasn't had a chance to answer or to ask questions?
Did you show, like, in your research of schools having prevention, bullying, prevention from bullying?
Oh, me? Oh, I thought you said Lauren by chance. So I actually, when it comes to that, no, I actually wasn't able to see that education-wise when it comes to bullying, but I was just seeing like how the world reacts to it in families. My main focus was on families. I should have looked at schools. I'm sorry. But from what I've known in my research before in other past classes, I noticed that when it comes to school, there's always counselors right there as well that are willing to listen to you if you're not super confident with your parents and stuff. So, and definitely schools don't allow any bullying any time. I feel like here in Connecticut, people always do sarcasm, and sometimes they don't. When they do a really rude sarcasm, people like really take it seriously to the point that they can get you expelled or suspended.
Thank you. Okay, did everyone get a chance to ask? I wasn't keeping track, sorry.
Yeah, everyone got a chance.
Okay, so we will move on. Good job, Catherine. Okay, who would like to go next? I know we just had those two scheduled. Does anyone want to go?
I can go next. Get
Okay.
with. Otherwise, I'll be nervous the whole rest of the night.
Okay.
So my topic was on divorce, and I actually took it through a different side of it because of some experiences I've been through recently with some friends. And like the title I brought to address it is Divorce, the Easy Way Out. And so this is like what I wrote for my persuasive argument thing, because it's actually been very prominent right now. I'm seeing divorce left and right. It's so much more common than when I remember being as a kid. I've had families get divorced. I've had friends go through divorce. And when we look on all those idols that we see on TV, divorce, they're just going through divorces through anybody like it's candy. Getting tired of it, we throw it away. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a cough. So the world views it as when marriage isn't the way we expect it, we just kind of throw it away. Like there's always more options. You could always come back to it. Try new things, try out people and see if, oh, we don't get along. He's not the one for me. But in certain cases, though, divorce is kind of a necessity. With my friends, every single one of them got divorces through abusive, cheating spouses who took it beyond edge. And so those cases, is divorce necessary? Well, it is, but it's not easy. This quote is one thing that I really, really liked through doing my research is, the demise of a marriage is never a happy event. It's by this girl named Morano. I was reading through her own blog post about going through her divorce through an abusive spouse who cheated on her, did all these things, and she went through pain and suffering with her husband, yet it wasn't an easy thing. And I've seen that through multiple people, my friends. I've watched them miss the old life that they had with their spouse, even if it involved abuse. Even through, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Even through the best, even through like the worst situations of their divorce, they miss it. They miss that companionship. No matter what the reasoning, you went from being a unit to being on your own. In a research assignment, somebody found out that those who were separated or divorced reported having significantly higher levels of depression than who remained, and that's because of that whole missing of what you had, even if it wasn't a good situation. With the cases of my friends, it was a little bit easier than those with children. In a case where there's children involved, it becomes a lot more difficult. You have to deal with what's best for the kids, find out a situation where they get to see their parents because their parents no longer have feelings for each other, they are at ends, and it can, sorry about my dogs. Hold on, sorry. Bo, Akira, stop. Sorry. They weren't fighting this whole entire time until just now when I'm speaking. But when you have kids involved, it's a lot more process. Kids tend to want to pick a side, and it could cause resentment to the spouse. In another study, it showed that children who grow up in homes with two married parents are less likely to experience a wide range of cognitive, emotional, and social problems in both childhood and adulthood when compared to those who have gone through divorce. When children go through a divorce, there's a lot of things that don't get taken care of. Like, more often than not, children don't go and talk to somebody about the divorce and why their parents got divorced and how they can still live their lives, even when their parents no longer have feelings for each other. Oh, my dogs, why? So in most cases, Akira, Bo, sit. So when on an outside perspective, you don't always see the negative sides of the divorce. When going through a divorce, you try to go out in the world and act normal, pretend, make it seem like, you know what, it's better being away from my spouse. And the kids at the same time are like, you know what, it's better seeing my parents separated than fighting all the time. And in a way, it is. But it's become so common in society that we have this mindset of, oh, it won't harm anybody else but ourselves. But in reality, it's harming our kids. And not just our kids, but also us. One thing we don't have enough of is ways to help, especially kids, understand divorce and how it influences them and what are the best ways to overcome the struggle of living in a divorced home. And it's kind of a scary thought, especially for thinking of having kids. What should be done about this is, I've read a lot of things, and from my experiences with other people, one thing that needs to be done is, especially in situations with kids, find ways to communicate with kids, like especially those that are in school. The counselors can pull them aside and talk to them and just kind of help them to understand what's happening, because most of the time they don't understand what's happening, but they don't want to bring it up. They don't want to tell others because they feel ashamed of it, the situation, or they're confused and they want somebody to reach out, but it's hard for them to reach out. And another thing is, when in a divorce situation with those who are going through abuse, there's laws out there. This is what I've learned from doing research about my friends that are going through divorce, where you have to be separated so many months before divorce. Doesn't matter if it was through abuse, reasoning that's a no-fault divorce, which means the government basically wants to see that you're separated, you're not living together before you go through a divorce. And some of these processes take up to 6 months long. In those cases, should we provide easier ways for those who are going through divorce to be able to divorce their husbands and get out of a situation where they can find help to escape the divorce of their family. There are groups that are there to help you, but I feel like we need to do more to promote these knowledge of these places where these families can go to get support when going through a divorce.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll start off the questions. I think you mentioned, well, you talked a little bit about no-fault divorce. Do you feel like no-fault divorce should be eliminated? So then, like before no-fault divorce, you could get divorced if there was abuse and adultery. And I think that's it. There might have been one more thing, but just for those two reasons alone, should it go back to that? Would that help solve some of the problems that the children involved in divorce face?
I think it's hard to say. Like, I've noticed that the no-fault divorce does have some benefits where in some cases it makes it easier to get out of divorce because you don't need proof. You don't need to show signs. You can just end a divorce. And with one of my friends, he was very good at hiding his abuse to the point where she didn't have any evidence whatsoever except hearsay. And so in her state, it was a no-fault divorce. So it helped her be able to get out of this divorce. However, I feel like it should be on a case-to-case basis, like interview the person, see why the reasoning for the divorce, and kind of look at it, send police reports, kind of do research into it. And if it is a situation where you find there could even slightly be a possibility of abuse, to switch it to a fault divorce, because that in the end will help out the victim and help them get out of the situation in an easier way where they're not relying on. So with my friend, she had to wait for her husband to sign the papers, and he would put it off. He was stalking her, all these different things. And so
faster resolution.
So in that situation, it would have been a faster resolution, and she could have gotten safe measures taken to protect her.
Thank you very much.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Lori. No,
okay.
You go.
Thanks. So you mentioned in the beginning, getting divorced is like picking candy now. You like when you're done with it, you just toss it aside. Do you think that has to do with the no-fault divorce, like why it's so much more prevalent today?
I actually do. With my research on no-fault divorce, I do think that is one thing, because before no-fault divorce, you actually had to work for it, because it wasn't just we can get a divorce for no reason. And that's what a no-fault divorce is. A no-fault divorce means we just couldn't work together. We couldn't work things out. Nobody's at fault. We just chose equally to get out of this marriage. And I do believe that that is a step in towards divorce becoming more prominent.
Thank you.
What do you think couples can do when it comes to the no fault? There's no abuse, there's no cheating, but let's just say the no fault. One couple just really doesn't want to be in this marriage anymore. What do you think some couples can do to mend and fix their relationship before they absolutely throw in the towel?
I think the best thing to do in that situation is find counseling, because it can provide a safe environment where you can work things out and try to. And in many cases, you may not find that common ground, but I know a lot of people aren't even going to try. They already have set in their mind, and a lot of research I was looking into, many people have it set in their minds that they're going to get a divorce before even telling their spouse that they want a divorce, and the other spouse just assumes they want a divorce too. And so it's very much a lack of communication, and a counseling setting can provide that open space to communicate, where somebody's monitoring it to make sure it doesn't get out of hand. And because when you fight, it can get out of hand. And when you have that someone there, they can tell you, okay, we're going to separate, we're going to come back to this another time, and like kind of set it on the table.
Any more questions?
Did you find um, like some, or was there a lot of um, programs out there for counseling, marriage counseling?
So it will depend on a state to state basis, because each state has their own counseling services, and it takes a quick search to find counseling that specializes in marriage counseling. My access is, I have a cousin who does it, but when I was in Idaho looking up counseling, it's easy search. You search your needs and you can find a counselor close to you with what you are looking for.
Do you think we have sufficient?
I think there could always be more. I think a lot more are focusing on focusing on like more of the depression side and stuff. And there isn't as many that specialize in family. I think we have a good amount. Like, I don't think we're in short supply of counselors that focus on marriage and family, but I think we could always use with more, especially with the way the world views marriage and how many people have switched from being like a family unit to this idea of individuality. And when you have that view of individuality, it could clash with your spouse, and you feel like your way is the only way, and you tend to you don't try to work things out because you were set in your views, where counseling can help you bring out both sides of it and stuff. So I think there could always be more, especially with how much we see divorce happen around us.
I'm sorry, I have another one.
Go for it.
Did you find any research too, as far as like marriage classes for the pre-marriage for?
Sorry, can you repeat it, because some of it cut out and I couldn't hear it.
And did you find any any information or programs out there that offer like pre-marriage classes? Did we talk about that?
So I know there's a lot ones through the church. I do in Arizona. I do know of one program, but that's only because I go to the counseling services. So in my research, I haven't really found any programs of prepare you for marriage, and I think that would be something that would be good for our society and may help with the lessening of divorce, because people go into marriage thinking it's going to be perfect. Oh, you married your best friend, everything's going to be good, happy, and then life hits you and people realize that, oh, it's not the honeymoon that I thought it was going to be all the time. And so I think having those classes and being helping prepare people could make them more ready for marriage and less likely to go through divorce.
I might have missed this part. Excuse me if I did. Did you mention anything about how to be advocates for children during like the time of divorce? Or did you research that?
I did it more from like what teachers and others can do, like teachers and principals and counselors for schools can do. So I didn't really focus on a global scale. On a global scale, the best thing we can do, I feel we can do, is be a support for these kids and not push off questions if they ask about why their parents got divorced. And as parents, we shouldn't push it off. We should be very open and honest with them and explain it and help them to understand as much as they possibly can of what's going on and why they are losing a family life that they had out.
Gotcha. Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much, Ashley. Good job. Okay, does anyone want to volunteer to go next?
I will. I'll get it over with. I hate speaking in front of people. So.
I was just going to remind people that I think if we try to keep it to the 5 limit, I think, the 5 minute, because I think we might be going over.
Okay. Okay, so my topic was cohabitation. Cohabitation, or living together as an unmarried couple, is a growing threat to families in our country. Cohabitation is not something new, but the amount of cohabiting couples in the U.S. has drastically increased in the recent past. In the 60s, about 450,000 couples reported cohabiting, and in 2012, over 7.5 million unmarried couples reported living together. Many people today see cohabitation as a test drive for marriage. When we want to buy a car, we test drive it. Cars are large investments, and we want to learn everything we can about the car to decide if that investment is right for us. Marriage is a very big decision. Obviously, we want to get to know the person we are going to spend the rest of our lives with. As a result, many couples move in together to test out the relationship before committing to marriage. There are problems with the idea of cohabitation as a test drive. When we look for cars, it often takes a few test drives to find the one for us. Sometimes it may take us a few relationships to find the person we want to marry. But when we end those previous relationships, it's not as simple as turning down a car. Those problems become greater when people are living together before committing to marriage. Things often get ugly in cohabiting breakups because financial responsibilities are typically shared. It's such a common occurrence for this type of ugly breakup to happen that lawyers are now suggesting creating a cohabitation agreement, or a document stating responsibilities and ownership in case of separation. The recent rise in the amount of cohabiting couples is a contributing factor to the rise in age at first marriage. Since the 50s, the age at first marriage for both men and women has increased by about 6 years. People are starting to get married a lot later than they used to. Living together before marriage allows for couples to experience what marriage would be like without the formal commitment. They think, why get married when we basically already are? My brother and sister-in-law dated for a year before he got out of the Navy, and then they decided to move in together. The two of them lived together for about a year when he finally proposed. I was really excited for her and offered to help plan the wedding. During all the planning, I often asked her if she was getting more and more excited for the big day as it grew closer. She would reply that she felt more stressed than excited. Her thoughts were that they could have spared the wedding money and continued cohabiting. She felt less excitement because she said nothing would really change for them. Sometimes living together does eventually lead to marriage. Couples who live together before marriage report lower levels of dedication, marital satisfaction, confidence, and higher levels of negative communication within their marriage than couples who did not live together before being married. Studies show that happier and healthier marriages come from waiting to live together until after being married. Cohabitation can eventually affect couples in a negative way, and it also affects children born to cohabiting parents. A study of the population done in 2006 revealed that over 11% of children are born to cohabiting parents. That percentage may not seem significant, but it continues to rise. In 2004, a study found that children of cohabiting parents are reported to have more emotional and behavioral problems than children of married parents. The differences in the groups of children became more significant during adolescence. This same study found that there is a drastic difference in behavior and emotional well-being in children of unmarried parents versus married parents, but no difference was found between the children of married parents versus single mothers. Not only are those couples that previously cohabited more likely to have lower levels of marital satisfaction and dedication, they are also more likely to perceive divorce in their marriage. Couples who cohabitated for longer than a year were more likely to report thoughts of divorce than those who cohabitated for less than a year. In addition to those negative outcomes, cohabiting mothers are more likely to be abused by their partner than by a husband. Children are also more likely to be abused by their mother's boyfriends, even if that boyfriend is their biological father. There are not many state or federal laws regarding cohabitation. Michigan and Mississippi are the only states that still have existing laws that oppose cohabitation, but they are not strictly enforced. Florida recently overturned their law that opposed it. Before it was overturned, breaking that law was a second-degree misdemeanor that could have resulted in 60 days in jail or a $500 fine. The remaining state laws that oppose cohabitation do not address the problem. The laws do not help educate society of the negative impact of cohabiting. They are simply 200-year-old laws that reflect the ways of society at the time. Just as there is a lack of laws regarding cohabitation, there is also a lack of programs and organizations opposed to it. Research proves that living together poses a threat to couples and to their children, and that in order to overcome this threat, couples should marry before living together. Because our society is very focused on creating equality, including equality for cohabiting couples, I don't think that creating laws opposed to cohabitation would be very effective, especially because recently similar laws have been overturned. Instead, it would be beneficial for the government to make couples more aware of the effects of living together as couples before marriage. This education could be conducted through things like the Department of Welfare, since they already have classes and trainings dedicated to family planning, which cohabitation could fall under, because many couples that cohabit end up bearing children together, and they typically earn lower incomes. Many people view cohabitation as a normal part of a relationship in today's society, and making the facts regarding it more available could change their attitudes. That's it.
That was very good. Thank you so much, Lauren. I love this topic because to me it makes so much sense, like on a common sense level, that you would move in together to make sure that you fit on all these different levels that you can't possibly know before you get married. But okay, so I had a hard time thinking of a question because every time I would think of a question, you would answer it for me. But I love that you talked about like doing classes for the Department of Welfare, but that will reach like the target group that is most affected by cohabitation or the negative effects of cohabitation. But do you think that it would be beneficial to teach these statistics or the outcome to like a high school level, like somebody younger?
That's a great idea. I didn't think of it at a high school level, but I really like that. I think it would be beneficial because, like I thought, doing it through the health and welfare addresses kind of the population that most likely is the one who's likely to do it. But I really like at the high school level, I think that'd be beneficial because I think, out of high school, it's typical to kind of start moving in, getting roommates, getting into college, and I think that's a great idea.
Well, good job. I think you did great. Thank you. Okay, who's up?
I'll ask the next one. So you did so well at explaining why it could be threats. Like I like how you brought up the moms bringing boyfriends in and how that could be more abusive. That makes total sense. But I want to know what you think as to why people tend to be happier after they wait to be married. Because to me, I guess, isn't marriage just a certificate? So why is that such a huge difference?
Right, and that's how it was like for my sister-in-law, like I shared in there. The only difference was like it was a legally binding thing now instead of just living together. I think it comes with just the level of dedication, like just knowing that they're in it for the long haul, I guess. Because just living together, they could just move out at any time, whereas marriage seems more of a long-term commitment. So I think that's my guess.
Yeah, I'm gonna add in one more thing.
Yeah.
I've heard when you cohabitate, you just have one foot in the door, one foot out the door. But when it's a marriage, you're kind of binded. And so, yeah, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, sorry. There's someone else talking.
You can go back up.
Okay. Lauren, do you think there's like predisposing factors that make people want to cohabitate more than other people?
In my research, I found, like I said, that it's more likely to be in lower level income homes, or like single mothers with their boyfriends. So I think a lot of it has to do with income, like if it's easier to share, rent with a boyfriend, or so I think the income is a large factor in that.
That's true. There's probably like taxes too that can affect that. Probably.
Yeah.
That rolls into that. Okay. Cool.
I hope that answered it good enough for you.
That's good.
All right, so my question is, you talked about a little bit about how children who are born to parents that aren't married have a little bit harder time. What do you think are ways that we can help those kids? Because, cohabitation is a hard situation, and sometimes the kids don't understand, well, why don't mom and dad get married? So what do you think we can do in those situations to help those that are going through a situation where their parents are not married but living together?
That's a really good question. I hadn't really thought of how we could help. I just being there for them and trying to understand their situation, because even, their parents might be, it might be their biological father, and sometimes it's not. And if it's not, I think research show that can be harder on the child. But being there and trying to understand everything that they're going through and that they're feeling, because it might not seem like such a big deal, if they're like, oh, you have both parents in your home, why is it such a big change? But they do have more behavioral problems, and it might just be because they sense the level of dedication isn't as great as maybe some, like the married couples. I'm not sure. But I'm not sure exactly what we could do other than just being aware of them and being there to support them. Sorry.
You did great. Does anyone else want to ask any questions, or?
Sorry, this is just a very simple question. Do you think, like, through your research and stuff, were you able to see, I know every marriage has a problem and stuff, but do you think, like, those that are not married have more problems than those that are married?
That's a good question. I don't think I came up with anything like that in my research, just about like overall marital satisfaction, I guess, overall relationship satisfaction. They tend to be less happy with their relationship when they're not married. I know marriages, problems arise in marriages, and no marriage is perfect, but overall it seemed to be that couples who are married were happier than those that were just living together.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you very much. That was really good.
Thanks. I'm glad it's over.
Yeah. Okay, did anyone want to volunteer for the next one, or?
I can go, I guess. Okay. Trying to figure out if I should do it on my computer or my phone. I'm going to try my computer. Okay. Hold on just a sec. All right. Let's do this. Hi, my name is Becca Bennett, and the issue that I want to present today is regarding technology addiction. Technology has been around longer than what I believe we realize. One of the first acknowledged technologies came around in the year 2400 BC in Babylonia after the creation of abacus, also known as the first calculator. This doesn't seem like a big deal, but thousands of notable inventions have come after the beloved abacus that have set the stage to where we are today. Some of these inventions include electricity, the typewriter, cameras, the radio, sound film, automobiles, x-ray machines, and television, just to name a few. Now, I'd like to pose a question for you all to ponder. What is the difference between the first technologies that were invented versus those we have today? Well, those of the past are clearly outdated and somewhat simple in their design. The technologies of today, such as the internet, smartphones, social media, and so forth, are a tad more complex and provide many forms in which we can be entertained. As technology is beneficial in the way we travel, communicate, and connect with one another, are there risks that are involved? Something to consider is the time that we spend consumed in technology. A major difference between the technology of the past and today is the depth of the attraction between its users, and the technological device itself. In the past, technology had an end. The abacus had one sole purpose, and its user would only rely on it when needed. On the contrary, today we possess devices that serve hundreds, if not thousands, of functions. For example, the iPhone in my pocket is used as my telephone, messaging device, camera, tape measure, email, web browser, CD player, voice recorder, notebook, photo album, calendar, clock, map, barometer, newspaper, television, pedometer, library, and wallet. What used to be single independently working objects have morphed into one, thanks to technology. Technology has come in a wave and swept nations with great force. What is deeply concerning are the recent studies regarding the harmful effects of technology addiction on families, children, and society as a whole. Greenfield 2017 expressed that technology addictions chemically appear the same as that of drug addictions. In a study among college students that were withdrawn from technology for a 24-hour period, the students reported feelings of panic, confusion, and isolation. These feelings, per Greenfield study, are due to the increase of endorphins while using technology. Technology causes an instant feedback response that allows for the release of dopamine. The more we feed into our technological habits, the more this chemical messenger is released. Just as one responds to the high of drugs, technology has the same effect. Our genetic makeup is one that craves rewards, although when we can't receive the thrill of doing so, that is when the withdrawal symptoms kick in. Another study done by Sakarya University in Turkey measured the effects that technology had on participants' psyche. It was found that students who were connected to the internet for at least 6 hours a day were shown to have higher psychiatric symptoms than their counterparts. Such characteristics included depression, obsessive-compulsive behaviors, interpersonal sensitivities, anxiety, hostility, paranoid ideation, and psychoticism. As an advocate of the family, these characteristics attributed to technology dependency are extremely alarming, especially on children and those who are predisposed biologically to mental disabilities. An article published from the American Journal of Psychiatry, compared the way different countries are responding to this problem. Countries that are combating this issue include China, Korea, India, Singapore, and Taiwan. These countries fully accept that technology addiction is a public health crisis, whereas in the U.S., the American Psychiatric Association has failed to recognize that this is a serious problem. In India, a rehab clinic ran by the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences has specific programs for individuals, most of which who are children, who spend too much time connected to technology. This program came around at a time that, around the same time that a 13-year-old girl took her own life after her mother asked her to delete her Facebook. This happened in India. How many of you have heard similar storylines of children being cyberbullied through a form of technology to the point in which they took their own life? Although there are a handful of organizations and programs that exist in the United States, the topic of technology addiction is still quite controversial. There appears to be few studies and not many laws in place regarding technology addiction in the U.S., most likely due to the fact that it's difficult to measure the level of addictions that Americans face and the intensity of the issue itself. As Pacific Asian countries have done, I believe we need to recognize technology dependency as a detrimental problem upon our families and children. I also believe we need to follow the lead of Dr. Kimberly Young. Dr. Young, creator of the Center for Internet Addiction and NetAddiction.com, has advocated the issue of technology addiction since 1995, long before this idea was truly a problem. She uses cognitive behavior therapies to realize what triggers addiction and fully treat patients. Part of what makes Dr. Young's approach special is the amount of resources she offers to inform and educate the general population of this issue. Dr. Young uses awareness, educational tools, assessments, rehabilitation, and therapies. She also specifies addiction types for more individualized help. From an advocacy standpoint, we should support Dr. Young's approach as it is concise, evidence-based, and one of the most thorough guides regarding this problem. Therefore, what needs to happen is change. As an advocate for families and a voice for future generations, I believe that a program such as this is needed now, today, more than ever. Realizing the effects of technology addiction is the first step of addressing how to solve it. Change that could come from programs such as Dr. Young's will create stronger marriages, happier children, independent adults, and a more mentally sound society. Thanks. Guys,
Thank you so much. No, that was good. You and I did the same topic, so I really love this topic. But my question was, I read about the Korean law. I was studying on that one, and I don't remember what it's called, like blackout or something, but where they cut out the internet from like midnight to 6 a.m. Do you think, to avoid, overexposure to technology, do you think that we should implement something like that in our country?
That's hard because I feel like people would have serious issues with that because it's kind of like I feel like people would be like, that's my right, so I think it's a good idea in concept, but I don't think it would ever happen here.
Not in our America.
I think people would be not happy with that.
Okay, infringing on our rights, yeah.
A little bit.
Okay. Hannah, did you want me to ask you a question, or you got it?
I can do it. And then
Okay.
I have to go pick up my kids, so I'm going to leave. But I sent Janelle some questions that I have for the rest of the topics. But so what are your ideas when a person justifies their technology use as a way for them to unwind or stay in tune with what's going on with their family or with the world?
Gotcha. I think what needs to be implemented or educated, needs to be advocated more is just balance. Because I think there's levels to addictions. There's people who are really addicted to things, and some that maybe have a slight, they could recognize it within themselves, oh, I might be addicted, but maybe it's not that far, So I think realizing, just teaching people that they're in control over their devices and their devices don't control them is what is important, if that makes sense.
No, totally. Well, thank you guys. It's been fun. I'm going to watch the other 2 speeches when they get posted. So thanks, guys. I'll see you later.
Bye, Hannah.
All right, I'll ask my question. So this is coming from what I've seen through working with kids at a after-school program, and kids are technology. Do you believe that we had some part encouraging us to get to this point where it has become an addiction, and what can we do to fix what is going on within our society when it comes to technology?
So you're asking if it's our fault, we brought this upon ourselves?
I'm asking if there's part of it that we may have had a part in it, not that we did it, but that we had a part in it.
Okay. Yes, I think so, because I look even at my life in comparison to my siblings' lives, and there's a 5-year gap between my next brother. So I'm 24, and then my next brother is 19. So, and then after that, there's 4 more. So it seems like there's such a difference in contrast between our life, how I was raised before this kind of wave of technology came, versus how they were. I think obviously, the 6 of us, it wasn't our fault this happened, but society as a whole, I do think, we don't know if we realized what we were doing. That's honestly my opinion. I don't think we realized what we were doing. I had this conversation today. I'm a nanny, and I had this conversation today with my friend who came over, and Baby was watching Baby Einstein. I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen that. It's a baby show, and it totally entertains him. He's just mindlessly engaged. But we were talking about how it's harmful because he's so stimulated, he's so into it. And when he goes to a petting zoo and sees a real animal and it doesn't move so fast, it doesn't flash across the screen, and there's not music, then it's not as interesting. And we lose that stimulant. And I think that sets the stage for how the next thing that he needs. You know what I mean? That's going to get old. He's not going to like that when he's 7. He's going to have an iPad, and it's going to be a game. And then, okay, it's not going to like that at 13. He's going to want to talk to a girl. It progresses. So I think we kind of did this to ourselves, but we didn't realize what it was going to look like because it all happened so fast. Sorry, that was a long one.
No, that was good. Actually, if you want, I have lots of research on baby Einstein. They've actually had huge lawsuits because they're hurting the development of children's, brain, cognition, and everything. So I stay away from baby Einstein.
It's evil.
It's evil. Okay, anyone else have any questions? Okay. Teresa, did you want to go next? And then I'll go last.
Yeah, I'll go.
Okay.
I don't really want to go last.
Okay.
Okay, give me a second here. Okay. We all know that when you touch a child in their private areas improperly, or at all, if you are not authorized to do so, you are in the wrong. As a child of about 7 years old, I knew right from wrong. When I was about this age, one day, on our way to my aunt's house from dance class, my cousin, a male teenager, decided to hurt me. He took me to an apple orchard behind a shopping center when he proceeded to fondle my lower private area with his hand repeatedly. Feeling uncomfortable, I struggled with him to stop as he tried to hush me up. After a minute, I started getting louder. When he probably got scared that someone would hear me, he decided to stop and take me home. I didn't tell anyone except my mother years later, but she chose to keep quiet. I didn't want to say anything to my father because I didn't want him to have problems with my mother or my cousin's side of the family. I believe my mother never said anything to anyone to avoid more problems. This has affected me over the years, and finally I've learned how to forgive my cousin without actually telling him so or accusing him to the authorities. Which brings me to think if I should have even mentioned it to my mother at all. I know from speaking with some relatives, I wasn't the only one who was abused by the same cousin. I have talked with others as well that have been abused as a child. I feel their pain, and I'm convinced that if we do not defend ourselves and speak up, society will continue to think it's okay to harm our youth. Over the years, I have come across many others who have been offended in this manner, and even worse. As I sit here and think about so many children being abused today, it leads me to believe society has a serious problem that has been around for a very long time and seems to have gotten worse. In 2013, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services reported 3.9 million children are abused every year. These cases were identified 5 years ago that were reported. I, like my relatives, and so many others have not reported their perpetrators because we either are scared, ashamed, embarrassed, or so forth to speak out, so this number is obviously underestimated. I think back and wonder if I should have spoken up to others aside from my mother. Would my cousin have stopped, sought help, and would I have saved my relatives from being abused? I can say that 2 of these abused relatives who are who are now adults, have resorted to drugs and are emotionally distressed. Our children are our future, and if we aren't able to take care of them properly, then our future generations will continue to harm themselves, others, and suffer through violence, drugs, sex, and many other physically, emotionally, and mentally ways. In 1998, a researcher, Vincent J. Coletti, had studied abused children that proved they are a higher risk of becoming smokers, alcoholics, drug users, and engage in sexual behaviors. By the grace of God, I was able to overcome this experience without resorting to some of these misbehaviors. But as you can see, many do not succeed in this. Therefore, should we say something when it happens, or should we simply keep quiet? Even though they are mandatory to report child abuse, some authorities do not report it when they have suspected it, because they feel our child protective system fails the child. Unfortunately, there are only 18 states that mandate everyone to report child abuse, but we do not need a law to pass just so that anyone can report an incident. Currently, there is a federal law in place, which is the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, CAPTA, passed in 1974, that helps protect children up to 18 years of age from all forms of abuse. We need to help stop these dysfunctional family patterns. It is crucial to everyone that we have the courage to protect our youth from abuse. In doing so, We can educate ourselves and others from the warning signs by going to the National Center on Domestic and Sexual Violence at www.ncdsv.org and confidentially report child abuse to Child Help at 800 for a child, which is 800-422-4453, or the National Domestic Abuse Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, 7233, as soon as it happens.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you for sharing that very personal experience. I appreciate your bravery. I think my question would be where you felt like you couldn't say something at the time. Do you think that, like, even now, years later, should that person be held responsible for the damage that he caused years earlier?
No comment. Just kidding.
Okay.
Just kidding. I was gonna say no personal comments. No questions. No.
Okay. Well, I guess, and then
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm perfectly
okay.
fine. That's why I said I'm good in the text. I said it's personal, but I'm good
Okay.
with it. I'm here to help others, but he's actually incarcerated and been incarcerated most of his life. So
Interesting. I know there's a lot, like a limit of, what is it? The statute of limitations, where you can't charge somebody after a certain amount of years. But should that like be eliminated if it's concerning child abuse?
I say no.
Okay.
No. Everyone should be held accountable.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Okay.
All right, I have a question. So I've known a couple of people who were abused as a child, mostly sexually, and they didn't approach people all the time. How do we encourage those that go through this, that go through abuse, to approach somebody and tell them the signs, with the fear of this person who's older than them hurting them more?
That's continually hurting them, or still hurting them, in other words?
In general, so in some of the situations, I know they were afraid to approach because they were worried that if they told somebody, they would be hurt even more.
Well, like I said, yeah, we do get, embarrassed or shamed. Well, at a younger age, yeah. I would have never, wanted to have said anything. I'd just be too, embarrassed. Therapy does help. My therapy it was all personal. I didn't go to an actual, therapist. So, but
how can we encourage them more to come out and tell the truth? If, in some situations, parents don't see the signs, what can we do as advocates to kind of get it out there? Like, if this happens to you, you need to approach it, and you'll be safe when you approach.
There are tons and tons of programs and phone numbers. That website that I stated, that if you want to go to that one will give you a bunch of resources. There's tons of resources for those that are actually, so there's even hotlines that you can call if you're actually going through, if you're actually, if you're a victim, or even if you were, in the past. So.
On the flip side, do you think that, oh my gosh, I literally just forgot my question, guys, I'm sorry. Do you think that there are ways to be advocates for, guys, seriously, my pregnancy brain is so real. It's like I'm in such a do you think there's ways to advocate, Ashley was saying more for children, right? For the children, finding help. Do you think there's ways that we can advocate to parents and teaching them? Should there be more educational protocols into like showing them, hey, like this is possible. Like I think some parents just don't believe it. Like you mentioned, that's not uncommon. Like that's really common. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, is it the parents' fault in that sense that they didn't see the signs? Like, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't like to put blame on people, but you know, my parents worked hard, and so they left us, my brothers and sisters, to other family relatives to help out. But I'm having a brain fart too. There's plenty, like I said, there's plenty of programs, websites, and even the one like I mentioned that you can go into and look, and there's programs out there for prevention. Actually, the government is starting to, there's current laws that are changing on a state and federal levels that are currently changing to help to better support the children being, abused nowadays. So yeah, there's you can prevent, and there's I didn't quite think, I mean, it makes sense that there was one program that they were stating that to help the parents to be more productive as far as in the labor, to make sure that they have jobs, and to have someone like a mentor to come and, kind of stick with the child, or help the child be supportive in that sense, to look after the child.
Yeah.
But even then, I mean, that's one reason why I would never, I had a son, and I wouldn't ever want to have a girl, but it happens to boys too. So, the government is starting to be more, proactive in changing the laws, for one, and gearing towards protecting the children, finding ways of preventions and stuff like that. So, which I'm glad. But like I mentioned, only 18 states are mandated for all citizens to report abuse. When I say they should all, like I said, we don't need a law to pass to report an incident. So yeah.
Awesome.
Hannah she sent me a really good question. She was wondering if you found, or if the research that you found, did they indicate that mental health was a reason for the abuse? So does the abuser have mental health issues and that's why he does it?
Well, yeah, and then like I said, that there's like a repeated pattern. Honestly, I think my cousin was abused, the one who abused me. Well, being in prison, I'm sure he was abused. So I think, yeah, he was abused and he passed it on. And so, that pattern continues. There's some that, so some, it's not that they were abused in that specific sense, in particular, like sexually, but the pattern does continue. Not with all, obviously, but
yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, then I am the last one, and we will be done. Like I said, I did technology addiction too. Mine is a little different take, so I am going to go ahead and read it. And we'll go from there. Okay. This is a little nervous. How much you start? Okay. A collective sigh could be heard when my husband's phone rang and the caller ID displayed the name of his ex-wife. These conversations rarely began or ended well. This particular phone call was no exception. The one-sided dialogue that I heard that day was a conversation that I had anticipated. What? Slow down. Police? He was pepper sprayed? He tried to kill you? My 15-year-old stepson had just been arrested after putting his mother in a chokehold because she was removing all video game consoles from his room. And we weren't shocked at all. The signs had been there for years. Like the majority of children, especially boys, he loved video games. After witnessing the destruction that he left in his wake if he wasn't allowed to play, I could somewhat understand his mother's submission to his addiction. Even as a young boy, his character and personality traits started to mimic that of a person addicted to hardcore drugs. It honestly scared us. Years ago, we purged our home of video games, but our concern was not shared with his mother. Our cherished relationship with him grew dim, and I blame the video games. Was it his excessive video gaming that taught him to refuse to do his homework in first grade? Was it the video games that triggered him to bite a girl in the fourth grade over a pencil she borrowed? Could the video games have been the reason he barely ate and looked like a skeleton at 13? Could we possibly blame the video games for his constant, either zombie-like or completely irate personality? Could they have influenced him to have unprotected sex at 14? Well, some of us may have the willpower to refrain from engaging in addictive habits. From a developmental standpoint, this is not so easy for children. The frontal cortex of the brain can be described as the braking mechanism for our thoughts that lead to actions. A person's control impulsivity isn't fully developed until well into their 20s. Brain imaging research continues to prove that the effects of technology addiction have grown to mimic that of drug addiction. Dopamine is the feel-good neurotransmitter that is the most critical element in the addiction process. Eating, especially eating craving foods like chocolate, can raise dopamine levels by 50%, while sex can raise dopamine by 100%. Snorting cocaine increases dopamine by 350%, and ingesting crystal meth creates a whopping 1,200% increase in dopamine. A groundbreaking study conducted in 1998 by Co-op concluded that video game raised dopamine levels equal to what sex does. That was in 1998. That was before our 72-inch screens, before our first shooter video games, before online gaming, before the hyper-stimulating and highly arousing games of today. Dr. Andrew Doan of the U.S. Navy said, "Video game playing is risky in young minds that cannot say no, as video game playing literally hijacks their thoughts." Dr. Carderis, author of Glow Kids, put it this way: "We'd be horrified if our young children were exposed to something as inappropriate and as stimulating as sex. Yet we're letting them get virtual brain orgasms every time they play video games. Knowing that, is it really any wonder that kids are so hooked on their electronics? A child simply does not have the neurological capabilities to deal with that level of stimulation." A study conducted in 2018 by Murat Iskander found that technology addiction in childhood makes this period of life more difficult. Excessive use leads to a loss of one's sense of time, social withdrawal, a sense of danger and depression, and anxiety and obsession. Most may agree that it is the parents' responsibilities to monitor how a particular activity impacts their child's development. But our society over-exaggerates an agenda around the idea that in order for our children to compete in a global economy, we must be pushing an iPad in front of our kindergartners and teach them by means of video games. How would parents feel if they knew that the very people that are creators of these technological advancements send their own children to tech-free schools because they are worried about the harmful effects their own creations have on the psychological and social development of children? It is a contradiction that requires accountability. Currently, there are no laws to protect us from this threat in our country. Intervention on the government level is vital. Regulations controlling the level of addictiveness their games contain are paramount. Video gaming companies need to be responsible for the effects of their products. Intervention on the local level must emerge. Parents and teachers need to be exposed to the research. We taught identifying behaviors that can lead to technology addiction. Our communities need programs that help children and families navigate and regulate their technological use. Technology addiction is destroying our families, and it is targeting our children first. The ability to recognize and help those that may be more susceptible to technology addiction allows parents to continue to benefit from the positive aspects of technology while refraining from the negative consequences of technology addiction. That is it. Any questions?
I'll ask first.
Okay.
So, really good job. I've never thought about it that way. Do you believe that the way to fix this is get rid of video games, period, or just be more advocate in monitoring kids and only letting them have so many minutes or so many hours with it, a week? What do you think is the best way to help with, especially when it comes to video games?
Video games. Well, I think a good rule of thumb would be like if there's an hour on the video games, then there's an hour outside. There's an hour. If you're going to have a virtual life for an hour, then you have to have an actual physical life for an hour. But I do believe that video gaming companies should be responsible. They perform studies to find out how many. So, okay, the way the brain works, like the rapid change in scenery and the rapid change that just exists in video gaming, they put those changes in as much as possible because they know that it is addictive. They have done so many studies, and that's why if you look at like children's programming like Sesame Street compared to I don't know what else is out there right now, but just another regular one after school program, the way they are developed, the way they are constructed, there's some of them target how to make their program addictive, and others target how to be educational. So I do think that technology companies themselves need to be responsible and regulate how many addictive, or how many, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just like a quick flash thing and it just targets your brain and releases those dopamines. Yeah, they need to be regulated on that.
Okay. Do you think that, I mean, you might not have a specific answer for this, but do you think we can like turn back the clock on what actually happens like physically with our bodies when we're addicted to technology? Because I know like for other addictions like drugs, it's hard to go back, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people relapse. So do you think there's like 100% like somebody who's really addicted to technology or video games can turn back and make that change?
Yes, absolutely. Our brains are very plastic. They will change. They can heal themselves. There's several programs. They're not, there's a handful of programs that will, they do like a technology detox, and they recognize that technology is part of the world. So they slowly bring these addicts back in touch with, computers and phones, stuff that they need to be involved in this world right now. You can't just, I guess you could just go live in the mountains, but so yeah, and they have found that they can reverse the damage that is done on the brain. And then they have taken brain images after these people have gone through the program, and then they are more like, and actually back to what a regular brain looks like and how a regular brain responds to stimulating activity. So yeah, it can be reversed.
Awesome. Thanks.
And so you mentioned too that the makers of the technology don't send their children to schools that are technology free. Would you say that all schools should be that way?
I yes, up until the age like probably 12, 13. I do think that when the brain is that young and it's still learning how to develop, that it doesn't need that extra stimulation, because like Becca talked about, I think, Becca talked about her friend, how he's just always going to want more, and so you're creating this reality that isn't, that they want instant gratification, and that's not life, and they're going to have a hard time once they become older and adult and realize that this is not how life works. So but I do think that technology is part of this world, and it is a great thing, and I love it, but I think that it needs to wait until children's brains are further along in development, and stay out of school until they're further along in development.
I think that's a good idea too. Does it show anywhere? Did you find any information or research on as far as like the, like the, let's say radioactive waves, from technology. They say like cell phones cause brain tumors.
There was some, but the research is not credible, is what I have found. So yeah, it's kind of touchy as far as, they can't connect cancer to radioactive waves emitted from the TV or the screen.
Just saying, like, if our kids are like attached to electronic device all day long.
Yeah, I don't know.
Health-wise, as far as
there's not enough research, but my sister will just claim otherwise. She had breast cancer, and she's going through breast cancer right now, and the breast that had it the worst was the breast that I don't know if you guys do it, but you take your phone and then you stick it in your bra, and that breast was the one that had it the worst, and she just totally is convinced that it was linked to her cell phone being that close to her at all times. So and more research needs to be done on that to prove that.
I agree.
Okay, nobody else? Okay, well, I highly recommend Glow Kids by Dr. Cardares. It is an amazing book if you want to learn more about it. It just teaches you how the brain works and what it's doing, what technology addiction is doing to our children's brains, and how to counter that. So thank you very much. This was a long one. It's good. And Becca, do you mind posting it? Because we all have to submit this with our speech.
Yes. We have until tomorrow night at 10, right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Will.
All right.
So I was looking at the instructions just now, and it doesn't say we have to turn it in individually. Where was it at? Do you know?
I didn't see it either.
I saw it, I believe it was in the announcements up front, like on the home page. I think.
So are we supposed to do it in the discussion board, or are we supposed to each submit the entire video?
Oh, no, I think one video gets submitted, but your speech.
Oh,
okay, that's what I was wondering, because I'm like, that seems like overkill for submitting this really long video.
It did. Oh, wow. Okay, I read it totally wrong, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're supposed to submit the written speech, because she said, I think, what would she say? Because it was sometimes it's hard to hear the person speaking, so that's why she wanted to see it in writing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if you just go to due date 3, it should just have it on there just for the assignment.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Night, everybody.
See you later.
Bye. Good night.